Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good day, depending on where you're watching us from. Today, I'm just coming to do a bit of a catch up and just hanging around on this tribe. I was just thinking a little bit earlier, we are on a challenge and today is day 12, which means we have been doing this for just a little bit before a couple of days time. We've been 2 weeks into it. And so I've just been thinking about it and I thought, you know what, I want to try and do the content for day 13, which will be tomorrow. Tomorrow is church day for me. And for those who know me, I don't like doing streams on Sunday. I love to keep it like a Sabbath. I love to leave it for church and stuff to do with church, but I thought, well, I can do the content a little bit earlier because it's a weekend. I've got a bit of more time on my side. I've got a few more things that I can talk a little bit about, and then tomorrow I'll see if I can be able to record the content for Monday, and then we'll continue with the rest as the week goes on. If you're new here, or if this is the first time for you to come in contact with this channel or with this lady, I'll begin by introducing myself. I'm Claire, and I'm glad to have you here. Thank you so much that you could find us, that you could get some time to come and hang around with us. If you're watching this in real time, you're so much welcome. Feel free to interact with us, drop us a chat, drop us a message, and we'll be more than happy to reply to it. We'll be more than happy to catch up with you, to interact with you. But if you're watching this in the future, I'm so glad that you could be able to come across this content, and I really appreciate it. And so I'm going to go straight into what I wanted to talk about today. As I said, we have been on a challenge for the last 12 days, and the challenge is for 40 days. And so today I'm going to be bringing the content of what we'll be doing for tomorrow, which will obviously be day 13. Before we hit the 2 weeks on Monday, and I'm excited about it. And so let's go straight into it. Growing up back home, I am Kenyan. If you did not know that, I'm so proudly to be Kenyan. And as I was growing up, I grew up on a farm. So my parents had some cows, some pigs, some chicken, name whatever animal you can think about. So my dad was a big fan of eating meat. So we constantly ate meat. I remember days when my mom will be like, today we're going to eat vegetables only. There'll be no meat in this house. And then dad will disappear. When he comes back, he'll come back with some meat. And then we'll have to go back and cook some food. And that was my life, really. And so when I became more or less independent, I left home, I got married, and then I got married to a guy who also happens to love meat. And my husband, bless him, wherever he is, I'm sure he's not watching this, I can talk a little bit about him. He loves meat, and is the kind of a person who as well has those traits like my dad. He'll basically just disappear, and then when he comes back, we'll say like, today we're eating beans for dinner. He will disappear and come back with meat. Obviously, meat is amazing. It has its own great values. It has got a very high biological value. If you're thinking about what's biological value, it's just that ability, and biological and digestibility, which means that if you eat meat, what happens? Meat is your protein mainly. The protein gets broken down into small fragments, which are called peptides, and those peptides can sometimes also be broken down into the constituent amino acids, and this allows them to be absorbed into the bloodstream, and that's they're used for the various purposes in the body. And so because meat tends to have a higher biological value, or it's also higher digestibility, it also has a higher absorption. So if you eat meat, you'll tend to have a better digestion, and you end up having a better outcome compared to, let's say, plant-based proteins. And so meat has its own advantages, and please hear me well, hear me right. I'm not here to demonize any food. As a nutritionist, I believe all food is good and is important for the body. It's all about moderation. And so fast forward into my own life, I got to a point, and of course, if you're looking at how much meat you should be eating, that's something that you need to consider. Is about 70 grams of meat per week, not per day. And some of you, I know you'll be wanting to say to correct that, but it should be per week. And that means there's like a handful or something like that. And so coming back into my home, it got to a point that we were just kind of eating quite a lot of meat. And of course, meat has its own advantages, I've already said. But for those of you who've been watching all the news around the global warming, the impact on the environment, etc., you'll know if you followed the COP meetings. Recently, there's been the COP in Dubai, where they've been coming together to talk about the climate changes and things like that. So people have been looking at some of the ways in which, particularly among other things, we know that the transport sector has its own things to blame for that. Different industries have their own blame that you can put on that. But if you're looking back into food production, it also has a share in which it contributes towards global warming, simply because if you've got things like animals, in particular livestock production, and if you go back even a little bit more into breaking it down into things like dairy production, beef production, what happens is that because the animals, once they eat, they have particularly what are known as the ruminants. They have the 4 stomachs. So once they eat, they ruminate on the food, and then as they're burping or as they're belching, literally what happens is that at the end of the day, they produce methane gas, and that methane gas has a more impact on the global warming because, of course, it's a greenhouse gas emission. And so because of that, we've had this conversation, and we are being told over and over again, we need to reduce the meat production, we need to reduce meat consumption, etc. And of course, because of that, there's been like kind of a challenge, people trying to talk about alternative proteins, and that's where my research is mainly based on. If you ever come across some of the things that I do, I research on alternative proteins, and I've done quite some work on things like pea proteins, basically plant proteins, and a little bit on insect proteins. And that's something that I would love to continue to do as I continue with my research, God giving me the grace. And so when you're thinking about this in terms of animal production, obviously we are putting more pressure on the environment because of animal production. And so all this talks about trying to find alternative proteins and trying to find alternative ways of eating. And so one of the ways that has been suggested is trying to think about the sustainability of your diet. How sustainable is my nutrition? Thinking about sustainable nutrition is, of course, trying to understand the food that can still be able to meet your needs. So it's a balanced diet, but not at the expense of the environment. And so that's where things like plant-based nutrition comes into play. Plant-based nutrition just means you're trying to eat, most of your food is from plants, and then at the end of it all, you might want to substitute it with other things. You may want to eat a little bit of meat rather than eating a lot of meat, etc., so that your food is mainly plant-based. So that's fruits, vegetables, nuts, etc. And then once in a while, you'll eat meat and things like that. And so because of that, today I want to talk a little bit about plant-based nutrition, and I'm going to be discussing this based on one very common eating method, one very common way of eating, which is basically known as the Daniel's First. For those of us who are Christians, you might have heard about this, and even if you're not a Christian, you might have heard about the Daniel First. And so I want to talk a little bit about the Daniel First, and then I will talk about what to expect on day 13 of the challenge. And of course, because I don't want it to be used and say like I did not say the right thing, I'm going to do a little bit of reading so that we can be able to understand what the fast is about, and then I'll talk about the activity for tomorrow. And so for the first time, I have the privilege of going into the book of Daniel and just reading a little bit about it to talk about the fast. If you go back into Daniel chapter 1 verses 12 to 16, There are 5 verses that describe the diet. Verse 12, it talks about, of course, it's a story where they were asked to eat some food that was prepared for the kings and things like that. And Daniel said, he says in this, I says, prove thy servant, I beseech thee. I'm going to read King James Version. I don't do King James, but this is what I have anyway. 10 days, and let them give us pulse to eat and water to drink. Verse 13 says, let our countenances be looked upon before thee, and the countenance of the children that eat the portion of the king's meat, and as thou seest, deal with thy servants. So he consented to them in this matter and proved them for 10 days. And at the end of the 10 days, their countenances appeared fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children that did eat the portion of the king's meat. Thus Melzar took away the portion of their meat and the wine that they should drink and gave them pulses instead. So basically what we see here is that Daniel rejected the food that was rich, the food that was indulgent, that was things like meat, that was things like dairy, that was things like wine, among other delicacies, and they chose to consume food that was just basically pulses, or they were eating mainly fruits and vegetables. So it included fruits, there was vegetables, there was pulses, whole grains, and lots of water. And of course, this particularly states that the food was heavily based on pulses, which were used as the main source of protein. And we see at the end of the 10 days, Daniel and his friends, they appear to be much more stronger. They appear to be much more healthier. They were mentally, physically healthier, stronger than anybody else that was around them. And after they've done these 10 days of a fast that they did. So if you're looking at it kind of in a way, it just shows that they eliminated food. They eliminated meat from their diet, and they basically concentrated on eating plant-based food. And so before you hear me again wrong, hear me a little bit, give me a bit of a minute to explain this. So what they did is that they decided, of course, there's a more deeper meaning, spiritual meaning to this, because they didn't want to eat food that was sacrificed to the idols, which was part of what the king was offering to them. That's another part of a spirituality that I'm not going to go into that, because obviously I wanna relate this to the diet that I'm going to talk about. The other thing that we see from that is that they decided, as they were doing this first, is that they got rid of, let's say, mostly the delicacies in their diet. So they stayed away from meat. Number one, they stayed away from wine. They stayed away from those like calorie dense things that you can think about. And so let's just break that down a little bit into what I want to talk about today. So what you can think about is that you can think about, like, why do they appear much more fairer? They appeared much more like looking much more nicer, healthier, fatter compared to the other people who ate meat. Number one, because their food was mainly composed of fruits and vegetables. Fruits and vegetables are rich, I've always talked about this, in antioxidants. So they are quite really rich in those antioxidants, and those antioxidants can actually help to repair the body as it goes through the fighting the various reactive oxygen species that are released into the environment and things like that. When you're eating, again, fruits and vegetables, they tend to have different polyphenols or phytonutrients in there, and those can have like anti-cancerous properties. They are dense in things like refuges. Refuges is good, or dietary fiber is good for your bowel movement, is good for the gut, and that helps the gut to be able to ferment any of they get fermented in the gut. And once they get fermented in the gut, they can actually also result in harvesting of energy, and that can be of a positive impact on the health. You can, if you have a healthy gut, the gut is the second brain. We know that healthy gut modulates things like your immune function, modulates things like your your mental health, etc. And so when they eliminated the meat, it just meant that they were focusing on food that was kind of rich in these antioxidants, it was rich in vitamins, it was rich in minerals. And of course, they concentrated more on pulses, and pulses are rich in protein. And of course, if you want things like iron, you can still get your iron from the beans. You can still be able to get your nuts if they ate nuts and seeds, which of course are rich in things like oils. They will have like omega-3 fatty acids, etc. If you're eating like things, if they're eating like, let's say, whole grains as well, in that moment they were trying to get all that they needed in terms of being able to get the fiber in there, in terms of being able to get their the fiber and making them feel full for a longer time. Does it mean that then meat is an enemy? Nope. It doesn't mean that meat is a devil. It doesn't mean that you need to exclude meat from your food. But what I just mean is that when you do a Daniel's fast, so I'll break down some of the beans or some of the foods that you can consider eating if you're on a Daniel fast. Things like beans and lentils, which are of course the most important pulses, nuts and seeds, all types. They can be like fruits and vegetables, oils and fats, whole grains, herbs and spices. You can have unsweetened plant-based foods, and beverages. You can have some vitamins and minerals, supplements as such, if you really want to ensure that you're having enough at the end of the day. So go back into the story of what I was talking about. If you look at even going back into the original plan, so when God creates man, he puts man on the garden, in the Garden of Eden. They were commanded to eat the fruits, which were of course except for one that we know they were not supposed to eat, and of course they ended up eating, which was mainly the fall of man. So if you go back into the generations, and if you go back into like what was meant to be at the beginning, there were more eating of fruits and vegetables or natural eating than compared to all the things that we have ended up changing the eating patterns. And of course we have to evolve our eating and dietary patterns as we continue to grow, as the world population continues to grow, etc. And so what I want to do for tomorrow is, obviously you can't do a Daniel's fast in one day, but you can start somewhere. You can start small. And what I want us to do is start small by allowing ourselves to just have a meat-free day. I'm not asking you to never eat meat. I have been a vegan for 6 months and I know what it means to be a vegan. And I did test it, and I can tell you I did see so many different shifts in my health and things like that. But of course, there are things that you still have to be careful with if you're on that journey. And I'm not going to talk about veganism today. I'm not talking about vegetarianism. I'm not talking about a diet or things like that. I'm just basically saying trying to eliminate meat from the food for only one day. I'm not saying that you do this for a long day or for a long time, but also remember, when I'm talking about this challenge, as I've said, I am mainly focusing on what I'm doing, but encouraging, if you want to do this, you have to ensure that you have a clean bill of health. You are medically fit to participate in these things. So if you want to try this, it might be worthwhile talking to somebody who understands your journey. I will not be responsible to kind of subscribe to you or tell you do this, don't do this, because I don't know your journey. Everybody's journey is so different. We are all on a different journey. And so this is something that I'm encouraging myself to do and sharing it on this platform. But please, if you end up doing it without having a clean bill of rights, I do not take responsibility to say, okay, I am the one who told you to do that. So please, I'm begging and I'm saying, this is only for people who are healthy. And so what I want you to do is just to try and think about eliminating meat from your diet just for one day. You might already be a vegetarian or a vegan. Well done. You don't need to do anything. You just need to continue doing that. But if you are eating meat, and in particular, let me talk a little bit to my brothers, my dear brothers, people of color, and even sisters who love meat, who are vegetarians, maybe just giving yourself one opportunity one moment, one day, to just say, I'm going to go meat-free for a day. That will be sustainable because it means you're reducing your consumption of meat, but also you are allowing yourself to concentrate on other fruits and vegetables, plant-based nutrition, which will actually help you, which will actually enable your body to be able to rest as well, because of course it can put some pressure as well on trying to digest the food that you're eating constantly. And then you might want to take it a step further. One day, again, as I said, alone might not be helpful. You might decide and say, I want to take this a little bit more a step further. And maybe the step further that you'll be thinking of doing might be have meat-free days in a week. Maybe say Monday is a meat-free day where you just eat a food that doesn't include any meat. You can have 2 to 3 days a week where you're not eating meat. Of course, it's better to eat at least 3 times maximum of meat per week. And when you're eating that as well, try to go for the leaner varieties, and I'll talk about meat another day, but going for the leaner varieties and maybe including things like oily fish, because that's again good for your heart, etc. But for tomorrow is just encouraging you, if you're part of this challenge, is to kind of say, hey, if I am a meatitarian, I'm going to break that off. I'm going to be able to allow myself go for a day without meat, so that at the end of the day you are allowing your body that opportunity to be able to kind of just rest really and be able to detox itself. So as I bring this towards a close, I just want to talk a little bit something, as I've already mentioned. Daniel fast might not be for everyone. Again, I've already mentioned that. So it's something that you need to know. You know your journey very well. You know your journey very well, so that in the end, you don't end up with troubles. If you're introducing a lot of fruits and vegetables and plants in your body that you are not used to eat, you might end up with a little bit of stomach discomfort, but for a day, that shouldn't really be a big deal. That shouldn't be a big problem. That should be something that you can think about. And of course, hopefully, that's something that can enable you to see some healthy impact, to see some healthy shifts around your body. And so, as usual, I want to bring this to an end. I really want to appreciate those who continue to support what we do, those who continue to subscribe to our channel. Thank you so much. I really appreciate those who continue to like the content that we produce, those who continue to share, those who continue to comment, those who let us know that you are joining us from different places, spaces, and things like that. Really, really, from the depth of my heart, I really appreciate, I really celebrate you and appreciate you. I really am so grateful for all that you do. And so as I bring this to a close, if you haven't done so, why not just click that share? Why not click that like? Why not click that subscribe button? That will be amazing. And this will continue to encourage me to continue to do what I do, to continue to bring the content that I bring every so often. And this month we are doing this for 40 days. We have done 12 days. This is content for day 13. And I believe God giving us the grace. We are reaching out. 2024 is our year. We are detoxing not just our bodies, but our minds. We are detoxing our emotions and things like that. 2024 is our year of resetting. We are resetting everything that concerns us. We are resetting our mindset. We are resetting our hearts. We are resetting our bodies. And this year, I believe like never before, it's our time for us to prosper and be in good health, even as our souls prosper. And so we are challenging ourselves, no matter what it calls for. We are reaching out to get healthy bodies. And I've already said this on this channel before. You might do your exercise, you might drink your water, but if you're not healthy in your mind and if you're not healthy in your heart, you're not healthy at all. And so we are reaching out this year and just purposing and telling ourselves we have to be whole in our minds, we have to be whole in our hearts, we have to be whole all around, because once we cleanse ourselves, we cleanse our minds, cleanse our hearts, it becomes easier for us to be able to cleanse our bodies and have very healthy bodies, because I believe we have a mandate as we have these bodies which are the temple of the Holy Spirit to prosper and be in good health even as our souls prosper. And so that was content for day 13. I hope you guys have a great day. You have a great weekend. Again, as I said, if you haven't done so, you might want to consider sharing this content, passing it on to somebody else you think that it might be helpful to them, and clicking that like button or clicking that sharing button. And don't be afraid to make a comment on this channel. We are more than happy to. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer those questions. I'm more than happy to get into conversations. Don't make this become a lonely space for me. Don't make it become a monologue. I don't want to have just to talk to myself, but I believe that we can do this. We can make it a dialogue by just commenting, by leaving us a comment, by sharing this content, by watching, rewatching, and just coming back to it, not just for this content, but also for the other stuff that we have already produced in this channel, and that can be helpful. I hope that you have a great rest of your day. I shall see you again